Let's say thanks for another episode of the Venture Brothers. Thanks for nothing. There's a lot to talk about in this one. Let's get started. Spoilers ahead. We kick things off with the Monarch waking up to the sound of his wife getting ready for work. She is miffed at him for not taking his job as a supervillain seriously and tells him to meet her halfway to improve his case for increasing his level in the guild. I like that one of her suggestions was for him to arch someone else, and he says sarcastically, because that went so great last time, because in Season 3, he murdered a lot of arch enemies. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch leaves and arrives at Ventec Tower with a squad of guild troops to retrieve Orangutan's body. This episode also shows that she has officially switched over from her butterfly costume to the guild uniform for some reason. She's the only member of the Council of 13 to do this. Anyway, Dr. Venture hits on her, like he does. She says that killing a level 10 villain is not like killing a nameless henchman, and that the guild will investigate the matter. Brock comes in feeling sore after a hot and rough night with Wariana, who greeted him in the morning with the cold shoulder. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch demands the security camera footage, but he refuses to give it to her. With that lead blocked, she leaves. The pirate captain comes in, who was later in the episode referred to by a news anchor as the pirate captain, so that's his name. He shows a video that White filmed of Billy while he was still hopped up on the god gas from the previous episode. The video essentially mashes up that infamous video of David Hasselhoff drunk and shirtless eating a burger on the floor, and David after dentist. These two references just felt shoehorned in for a cheap laugh. In the Morpho Cave, 21 has put together a list of supervillains that Widewale has given sub-arching rights to for going up against Dr. Venture. The Monarch wants those supervillains dead, but 21 doesn't want to kill again, and feels bad about accidentally killing Orangutan. This is kinda weird because 21 has killed people before. He was the one who accidentally fired the shot that killed the previous Venture Brothers clones. He has killed other henchmen in seasons 4 and 5, so this sudden remorse about killing seems a bit off. Before they do anything, they have to get the Morphomobile out of an impound lot since it was towed at the end of the previous episode. Billy and White appear to live in a house shared by Billy's mom, the Action Man, and Colonel Gentleman. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch shows up to question Billy about the orangutan incident. The next villain in line to arch Dr. Venture is a supervillain and XP of MODOK named Think Tank, complete with a giant head and tiny body, who also happens to be Dean's philosophy professor. He seems like a decent enough guy. We see Dean in his class, and after getting word that he can begin arching Dr. Venture, he suggests to Dean that he not be at home during his assault to keep him out of the crossfire. The Council of 13 is having a meeting with some of the members appearing via hologram. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch, who is in a guild limousine, tells them that Billy said the Blue Morpho was responsible for Orangutan's death. The other council members are skeptical because the original Blue Morpho died in the 70s. Widewale mentions that he bugged the security cameras in the Ventec Tower lobby during his last assault and assures that he can get them the footage they need. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch has to break the news of Orangutan's death to his wife, a supervillainess named Battleaxe. She runs a bar called Ye Olde Battleaxe. She is an Irish woman who speaks with a thick accent and uses a number of colloquialisms, so she can be a bit hard to understand. Even though she initially doesn't speak highly of her husband, when she learns of his death, she's distraught. She wants to know where his orangutan is, and Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch finds out that it had been impounded by the NYPD. She volunteers to accompany Battleaxe to retrieve it. While Battleaxe is getting into her costume, Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch checks her email on her laptop and finds that Widewale sent her the surveillance footage that she requested. Before she can watch it, Battleaxe comes out in full costume ready to go. Meanwhile, Think Tank arrives at Ventec Tower. He scans Brock through the window while he's watching a news program where the pirate captain's being interviewed by Wariana's alter ego. Think Tank's screen shows names Brock has been called, which humorously includes names given to him in jest by Shore Leave and General Gathers somehow. My favorites include Brock of Ages, Poppin' Fresh, and Babe Ruthless. Think Tank's tank treads can climb walls, and he finds Rusty in the tower penthouse. Brock is alerted and rushes upstairs. It turns out that Think Tank just wanted to play chess with an intelligent adversary. While Rusty's not a dummy, he isn't a chess man. After being arched the other day and having to deal with PR troubles, he calls the Guild of Calamitous Intent helpline, where Watch and Ward just mess with him. Brock arrives and doesn't do too well against Think Tank, getting bounced back by his force field and even gets shot off the tower by his cannon. Thankfully, Wariana caught him and apologized for being standoffish in the morning. As soon as she hears that Think Tank is causing Brock trouble, she teams up with Brock to take down the pompous son of a Gorgon that is messing with her man. Together, they bust Think Tank's tank. With a taste of victory fresh, Wariana invites Brock back to her place. Good for Brock. Considering how Molotov broke his heart so brutally and thoroughly, I'm happy that he found a new lady to share in the pleasures of rough sex. Back to the other plot. The Blue Morpho and Kano arrive at the impound lot to find the Morphomobile, just before Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch and Balax arrive. If you look in the background at the cars, you'll see a van with horns and a bull snout. My guess is that it belonged to the deceased villain Manotaur. After opening the door to the orangutan, empty whiskey bottles and the smell of Chinese cigarettes come pouring out. The Blue Morpho trips over one of the bottles, alerting Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch to his presence. She leaves her purse with Balax and searches for him. She finds him and Kano in the Blue Morphomobile, but he accidentally presses a button on the dashboard that triggers the car's flying mode, letting them escape. While she's alone in the orangutan, Balax takes Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch's laptop from her purse and finds the footage of orangutan's death. She notices a similar facial structure and beards of Dr. Venture and the Blue Morpho and concludes that the two are the same, and goes on a roaring rampage of revenge. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch gets back in the guild limousine and orders Watch and Ward to follow the flying Blue Morphomobile. Also, because the Blue Morpho is still the Monarch we know and love, he orders Kano to fly by Ventec Tower to take a dump in Venture's pool, which he does. He manages to do this from a flying car and have it land in the pool at the top of a skyscraper. That's impressive. Gross, but impressive. His wife sees the car disappear at the top of the tower. Now, follow this. Hank and Dean are riding in Hank's hover car when they see Think Tank trying to hail a cab in front of Ventec Tower. Watch and Ward, driving the limo, swerve out of the way to avoid hitting them and turn into the path of Balax driving the orangutan, who then swerves out of the way to avoid hitting them. She drives into the garden in the center of the circular road, which forms a ramp that rockets her up into the air and crashing down, ramming into Think Tank and then crashing into the chasm in the Ventec Tower lobby. Holy cow, that was a ride. I gotta breathe. So, Think Tank is dead. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch uses her binoculars to look up to the top of the tower and sees Rusty looking down at the commotion. When she returns home, the Monarch is shaking in fear that his wife might have found out that he is the Blue Morpho, but she doesn't think it's him. She thinks it's Rusty. Okay, I want to talk about this now and return to this again in the discussion of the next two episodes. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch is too eager to assume that Rusty's the Blue Morpho in this episode and the next. Remember that this is a woman who has stood by the Monarch's side for years while he has been arching Dr. Venture. She knows what Rusty's like. She knows what a weenie he is. The two of them get along relatively well when he's not coming on to her. Why would she jump to the conclusion that Rusty is the Blue Morpho? Also, by how the events played out in this episode, Think Tank's death was an accident. There was no way to plan for Balax driving erratically and crashing into Think Tank. I guess maybe she didn't see him getting hit and could have assumed that Think Tank's body was already in the chasm, but Brock wouldn't be a part of that. He knows about the guild's rules. Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch jumps to a lot of conclusions and it feels a little bit out of character. I still love her though, but this just doesn't feel right. It's been taking me a bit of time to finish these videos, but I will try to finish this season's vlogs as soon as I can. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter @GamingGenji for updates on new videos. I'll see you all next time.